Welcome back to the New York Gun Guys podcast. My name is John.
My name's Taylor.
Producer Steve. Got no mic. Good work, Producer Steve. There's a mic for you, and it's not there.
Fucking-
What do you want? What do you want me to say?
Jesus.
Fucking
I
guy.
can't even... Yeah, damn, Steve.
I'm the behind-the-scenes guy. I'm not supposed to speak.
Well, then don't speak. You suck.
Speak when spoken to.
Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get a podcast, look it up. NYGunGuyd, all one word. Share, like, subscribe. Taylor.
Yeah, John, what's up?
I have a proposition for you.
Sure. Okay, what's the proposition?
I want you to voluntarily sell me back all of your guns for a $200 prepaid card, and it's mandatory.
Sell you back the guns? So wait,
Yes.
were the guns yours originally?
No, but it's mandatory. You have to sell them back to me.
But they weren't yours.
That doesn't matter.
But they're mine.
That doesn't matter. I'm the government, and I'm telling you, you have to voluntarily bring them in to sell them back to me, but it's mandatory. Yep.
I would tell you to go fuck yourself.
Oh my god! All right. If you have not caught on yet, we are talking about gun buyback programs and just how absolutely ridiculous they are, and that they make no fucking sense.
Right. In the New York area, especially, in New York,
it happens all over the country.
All over the country, but in major cities like New York, LA, Chicago, a lot of these kind of, shithole places, no offense to people who live there, but for crime and crime statistics, gun buybacks are a very popular way that police agencies and governmental agencies try to, quote, curb gun violence by taking them, quote, off the streets.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple of big issues that I find with this.
Yeah.
John, we're going to get right into this. The
Sure.
first one is, all the time, these are, quote, no questions asked. Cash for guns, no questions asked.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a flyer that was sent out actually for Saturday, December 5th, which is now past us, but recent. Says cash for guns, no questions asked. Saturday, December 5th, 2020. Receive a $200 prepaid card for handguns and assault rifles.
Assault rifles.
Quote unquote assault rifles.
Right.
Receive a $25 prepaid card for rifles, shotguns, and air guns.
You know what this means?
What does that mean?
This means that I can take my Mini 14 with a wooden stock, which would be valued at $25.
Right.
Put a synthetic one on, and it becomes worth $200.
That's a lot of Walmart gift cards.
I wonder if it is a Walmart card.
I don't know.
It's probably a vanilla. Okay. It's bullshit.
It is bullshit.
It's bullshit.
It is
Buyback
bullshit.
programs are bullshit.
Right. Like I said, my biggest gripe with them is that there's no questions asked.
Yeah.
Meaning that anybody could turn in a gun, whether or not it was used in a crime. Let's just say that gun could have linked a murderer to a murder.
Yeah.
That could have been the one piece of evidence that they need to convict somebody. Right. Now that guy, somebody went and turned in that gun, no questions asked. It gets destroyed, and the piece of evidence is destroyed.
Even if they ran it, let's say they did ballistics on it just to see if it was involved in anything. Well, you asked no questions to the person who brought it in, so who the fuck brought it in?
Exactly. Now you have a gun, but you don't know anything about it,
right?
Or who brought it in? That is my biggest gripe. Well, I mean, aside from the fact that gun buybacks are itself a big gripe of mine.
So, Taylor, what if I said to you, Taylor, if you bring in handguns to me, I'm going to give you a $200 gift card for each handgun that you bring in. I'm not going to ask you where you got it, where it was from, anything. What would that promote you to do?
It would promote me to go out and find some cheap handguns or steal handguns in order to sell them to the government in order to get some gift cards.
Right. I mean, no one's asking you any questions.
Right.
If you freshly steal them, they're not going to be reported stolen.
Right.
So
you just have to hope that if you're a criminal and you steal guns that you don't get caught stealing them or whatever. But now the piece of evidence is gone.
Right.
So that to me is a big problem.
Yeah.
Also, one thing which is very famous that happens in these is that very valuable and rare guns get turned in. 2014, there was a story in Connecticut of a Sturmgewehr STG-44 being turned in by the daughter of a veteran.
Yes.
Basically, the cops, as soon as they saw it, knew that it was a valuable gun. They say at the time worth 30, 40 grand. Now
Gotta
it's
be worth more.
Much more. And the interesting thing about this is, based on the news stories that I've read, they said that they told her how much it was, and they gave it back to her and allowed her to sell it.
Yeah.
Which to me
it had to be papered.
Yeah, which I was trying to figure out. I'm like, there's no like, I mean, she might have had registration paperwork with it if it was registered.
It's likely that the guy could have registered it when
when he brought it back,
all this
or
legislation came through that he had to do it.
Yeah, no, it could have been
I
registered.
think that's really the way that it went down.
They didn't say that though. They didn't say, "Oh, this machine gun is legal for her to own," so the cops gave it back to her. Basically, they said
I got to assume it was legal for her to own if they gave it back.
Right.
To her.
Yeah. But oftentimes, John, a lot, like, for example, a gun will be turned in, like, let's just say a Tommy gun or STG-44 will be turned in. And a lot of times they get destroyed.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yep.
Sometimes police departments can take in that gun on an ATF Form 10, say it's for official business,
Sure.
and use it, keep it within the department, but
Sure.
the gun can never be sold.
Yep.
It can never be, it can only be transferred to another governmental agency. That's the only way to save it from the shredder legally. Museums can take it as well, but the problem is there's a form, I forget what form it is. It's not the Form 10, which I thought it was, but basically the previous curator of the Cody Firearms Museum has a podcast, and they were talking about getting guns for it's called History Unloaded. That's the name of the podcast. And they were talking about, they wanted to create a specific museum FFL in order to receive guns for a museum. But federally, that's not a thing. And the only way that a lot of museums can receive guns, which is an old way of doing it, which they don't really do now, is basically they receive the gun on the condition that if the museum ever gets sold, or if it ever goes out of business, let's just say, that the gun has to be destroyed. Yeah. Which is terrible. So
it just doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't, but that's the only way they could receive it.
Here's a whole bunch of really rare, cool shit that belongs in a museum, but if you go out of business, we're just going to fucking destroy it.
Right, because if they're not papered, if they're not registered.
But I wonder if at that point another museum can...
I don't know, man. You know what? That's not something I'm very knowledgeable about, but these are the things that come up in gun buybacks.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll see really like a table full of old guns, of AR-15s, AK-47s, collectible
and they're
shit,
just destined for destruction, man.
Yep, they're just destined.
I've seen some videos of I don't know if it's in this country. You may have seen the videos of like all like the rifles and guns like laid out on like
and they get steamrolled.
And they get fucking steamrolled.
Oh god, that makes me cry.
And it's like, and it's always by the organization that did the buyback or whatever it is. And it's like they're just like flaunting it in your face, like, here are all your guns we're fucking destroying in front of you.
Yeah,
it's crazy, man.
Do you think that gun buybacks actually curb violence? There was an article that you had pulled up that you were laughing at earlier.
Yeah. I mean, before I get to that, like the article itself, I mean, do they get guns off the street? Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they do. Just because people, what'd you say, in New York City, they collected
Between 2010 and 2015, there was 5,000 firearms.
So, listen, that's 5,000 guns less. So, yeah, they work if that's your goal, is to just get guns off the street, as far as you just don't want guns. Right. I'm sure many of those guns were legally owned, and people were just like, oh, shit, I need money. I can just sell them. Or
I don't think a lot of them were legally owned, but
some of them definitely were.
Definitely were. Yeah, but not all of them.
Well, I mean, it depends on what it was,
Right.
But, again... in New York City, you really can't have anything. So I mean, there are people with handgun permits. Don't get me wrong. If you had a really old gun that you didn't shoot, didn't want, and it's just easier for you to bring it there, no questions asked, no paperwork. You just hand it to somebody, and they hand you a gift card once they run it. Then I can see people turning it in. What I was laughing at is I found this. This is from September 13th, 2020. They're covering what was going on in New York City. It says 33 guns traded for cash taken off the streets of New York City. And in the section there, it says related articles. It says 3 killed in shootings across New York City this weekend. And then it says 2 dead, 6 injured in shooting at off-campus party near Rutgers, which is not in New York, but just saying, it's like, dude, it's crazy. Like, you have this big article that's saying, oh, gun buybacks are a great thing. And then right in the middle of the whole article, it says 3 killed in shootings across New York City.
Right.
Guns,
even though a lot of guns are taken off the street, let's just say, I don't think that will stop crime. It won't stop the issues that cause crime. It won't stop the issues of poverty, of drugs, of gangs.
Yeah. I mean, when you see videos of gun buybacks, it's usually like elderly people.
Yeah.
Like I see a lot of elderly people who are turning in guns that were probably their
Sitting in a
significant
drawer.
others, or exactly like when my grandfather passed away. You know, he had a gun. He owned a business. It was a handgun. This was before I was an LEO. You know, it sat in a drawer for a while. My grandma eventually called Suffolk County PD, and they came and they picked up the gun. They vouchered it under her name. Technically, she owns it still. It's just vouchered. So I actually told her to call and see if she can get the information that she needs for me to go get it, because I would love to have my grandfather's firearm, you know, the one that he had. But, you know, so people do turn in guns all the time due to lost relatives, or, you know, what happens if someone bought a storage unit and now you find a drawer of handguns, you can just walk them over and you can sell them. You know, so I think there's things like that. I'm curious how many guns are stolen and then brought here. It's
a thing that happens. You know,
but
I don't
the thing
know
is,
the exact numbers.
they do run the gun. I mean, there was an article I saw. It said it was that it gets ran or it gets once over or whatever. If the gun is stolen and they run it, you're getting arrested.
You know what's amazing though? In certain states, like for example Arizona, where you don't need background checks to buy guns privately from people, there will be a gun buyback hosted, and then there will be people standing on the sidewalk across the streets holding signs,
buying the guns.
Yeah, buying the guns. We'll cash for guns. We'll pay you more.
Yeah,
you know. And there was a news story, or not news story, an article I was reading on a forum where a guy did that, and he bought a Colt Delta 10 millimeter. It's a 10 millimeter 1911 Delta Elite.
Yeah,
and he bought that from some woman. She said, "Oh, it was my husband's. I just don't want it anymore." And they were only going to give her like $200 for it or whatever, but the guy gave her like fucking like, you know, more money than that. But
so let me ask you this: Did the where was that, in Arizona?
It was in Arizona. It was like a sheriff's department.
Did the sheriff's department care?
Yeah, well, they did, but there's nothing they could legally do about it.
Because I'm curious.
They were off the premises. It was across the street, and as long as they weren't impeding, like physically blocking people from going to there.
Sure. Yeah. Legally, they can't do shit about it.
Right.
I'm curious how much of gun buyback programs are just basically a gun confiscation, a voluntary gun confiscation, versus you have a gun, you have to get rid of it, bring it here, and we can discard it in a legal way where you don't have to do any paperwork. We can give you money for it.
Most of the time, from what I see, it's more so of a voluntary thing.
But but what I'm saying is, do you believe it's more like gun confiscation push, or get rid of your guns, unwanted guns here in the easiest possible way?
I think it's the latter. I don't think it's a mandatory gun confiscation as of yet. Basically because they're saying to you, no questions asked.
Right.
If it was a gun confiscation, there would be a record of you turning in that firearm like they did in Australia. You'd have to bring it to the police. They would record the serial number.
Right. Okay.
So if it was mandatory, but this is the model for what it could be.
Okay, but what about mandatory buyback programs?
Well, a mandatory buyback
that's a
program,
confiscation.
Yes, it is a confiscation. But the way a mandatory buyback program would work, in my opinion, is different. It would have to be reported who's giving up the gun, you know, how many guns, serial numbers, etc. You would have to get some sort of
receipt,
voucher saying, hey, these guns
I turned in. Yeah,
exactly. So that way, if it ever comes up later, you say, no, I turned in my guns, which I would never say.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to get your opinion on whether you thought gun buyback programs, mandatory or not. I'm talking about not mandatory, are a step in the direction of confiscation, like you know what I mean?
It definitely sets a precedent.
Or if it's basically a department saying, like, because it could be a department saying we want to voluntarily, like, give us your guns because we don't want you to have them, versus give us your guns because you don't know what else to do with them. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
At that point, it's a little bit of both. But these gun buybacks we're seeing in these major cities, they're not confiscations. They are more so if you have a gun.
Well, yeah, it's voluntary. So it's voluntary.
It's
not a confiscation.
But for example, they're held at churches. It's more community oriented.
Sure.
A lot of times you see a lot of revolvers getting turned in. Occasionally you see like the Tech 9 and they post that one up, you know,
on the front.
Yeah.
Look what we got.
Yeah. Occasionally you'll see some quote, you know, gangsta guns or whatever. But a lot of times it's old janky shotguns. Yeah. It's old revolvers. It's, you know, like you said, one looked like it was a movie prop. There was one with an orange tip that
it might have been an air gun.
It could have been, or it could have not been. Like, so a lot of times they miss the mark on the intended purpose. You know, like you said, a lot of times it's old people just turning in their old guns.
That's what I think it is mostly.
You know, that unfortunately gun buybacks only affect the poor, the poverty-stricken, these inner city communities. You don't see gun buybacks happening out on Long Island too much. I mean, you could always surrender a gun like your relative did, but mainly it's in these cities, in these kind of poorer areas that, they know that people have them and they know that people need money. If they really wanted to give them what the gun was worth.
But these are also areas where gun crime is super high.
Right. But exactly. So gun crime is super high.
Right.
They have gun buybacks, and yet gun crime is still super high.
Oh, yeah.
So are the buybacks effective? I don't think that buybacks...
Well, I'm going to say that goes into our gun buybacks a way to prevent the current crime levels or future crime levels, or are their purpose even to curb crime, or is it to just have people get rid of their guns that they don't know what to do with? And that's kind of like what I'm,
it's under the guise of trying to reduce crime, but I don't think it does. I think, like you said, what it does is it gives people a way to get rid of their unwanted guns. And those guns could be crime guns. They could be guns that, were stolen or whatever. And that's probably the case. Like, I know a lot of people where gun laws, especially in the old days where gun laws were a lot more lax, you might have had a gun, let's just say you bought it in the 50s and the 60s in New York City or in Staten Island or Queens.
Yeah.
And then you just had it, and then as the gun laws changed, you didn't change with the gun laws. And your grandpa's revolver that he kept in the dresser that he bought in the 50s now is an illegal firearm.
Yeah.
So to some people, it's like, well, I don't want to get caught with this. He's no longer with us. What do I do?
It's an easy out.
You can't sell it in New York.
Right.
So what do? You have to surrender it. So in that case, you could say it's a mandatory, but...
well, I don't think it's mandatory. Is you have no choice. You have to come sell us back your guns.
Right.
I hate that they call it a mandatory buyback. It's a gun confiscation at that point. I mean, they're telling you that you have no choice.
I mean, I think that in my eyes, a buyback is a form of a confiscation because I don't think people should give up guns anyway.
Well, but it's voluntary, just like the voluntary waiver of your rights, that bill that's going through the assembly in New York. But just to backtrack on what we were talking about, do they believe that this is to curb violence or whatever? This person from the buyback program, it looked like it was in Brooklyn. It was held at a church. It says this person, Mr. Jones of Brownsville, Brooklyn, said he couldn't believe how much violence he's seen on a daily basis. And he said mostly starting from relatively minor, quote, beefs on the street. The way to bring down, this is a quote from him, the way to bring down crime is to be active on the ground, Jones said. This is a good first step in the right direction, but it's going to take more of us coming together. So, yeah, I think that in some people's eyes, this is the way to prevent crime. Do you think that, Taylor, let me put you in a situation. Okay. You live in a pretty bad neighborhood. Okay.
Hypothetically.
Sure. Well,
my neighborhood's good.
Let's say you live in a pretty bad neighborhood. You're used to seeing violence, whatever. Maybe you made some bad choices, whatever. Do you think that a gun buyback program would be your ticket to getting out of violent situation? Like, would you give up a gun? If you had a gun for protection, it was illegal, would you go and bring it there and sell it?
No.
If you had the intention of using that gun to kill somebody else, would you go bring the gun back there and sell it?
After I've committed a crime?
Well, at all.
No.
Before. It's going to be before, because that's their whole point, is to prevent a shooting. If you have an illegal firearm that you're planning on using to defend yourself against, I don't know, a gang member, because you're in a rival gang, or you're planning on doing, committing crimes with it, you're not going to go bring it back there. It's not preventing anything. As we said before, it's probably going to basically delete evidence from being obtained.
Right. And if I'm a criminal, a gun to me is utility wise worth more than $200 at Walmart.
Sure.
Now, John, there's a couple of things that people can do to, let's just say, troll a gun buyback if they really wanted to.
Oh. In New York?
Anywhere.
Okay.
There are firearms that it can be very easily made and turned in, which technically they're firearms, and you could get money for them.
Has to be operable.
Right. One of them actually is made by Serbu Firearms. Now, Serbu Firearms is a very well-known firearms. They made the Super Shorty. They make 50 caliber rifles. But the guy, Mark Serb, was actually a genius. He made this gun called the GB-22. The GB stands for gun buyback. You could look it up.
I will right now.
Basically, what he does is he sells plans on his website. You could buy these paper plans, and it's a 4-piece 22 single shot pistol. So the details on this is, with only a barrel, frame, slide, and recoil spring, the GB-22 can be made at home with steel plate and bar stock by use of a hacksaw, file, and drill. Attaching the barrel to the frame can be done via welding, roll pins, or screws. The roll pin method is detailed in the plans, though the user can easily adapt them to welding. The concept is to be able to make a simple working gun for whatever reason you want, though he stresses that you can sell these guns at gun buybacks for a profit. So, for example, the plans to buy this are $12.
Okay.
Right.
And then you have it.
And then let's just say you already have the material.
What's
laying
the materials?
around.
It looks like just
he said bar
sheet
stock.
metal.
Yeah.
Sheet metal.
Yeah, like bar stock, sheet metal, screws, like a spring. Things if you are crafty.
Even if you had to buy it, I mean, it looks like it would be less than 200.
He doesn't sell the gun just...
No, but buy the parts.
Yeah. Even
Like if you were going to
wanted-
buy the parts and create it, it would be less than $200.
Right, you could make this, he says, with a hacksaw file.
Yeah, it definitely looks like you can. It looks
So-
super basic.
So
Jesus.
you can do this, and this is basically he made this with the intent to troll gun buybacks, because he said these programs
It's 13 parts. Just to,
right 13 parts,
Right.
And in his eyes, gun buybacks are ineffective because basically you could do this and make some cash.
Yeah.
All right. Now
We're not telling anyone to do that.
No. But listen, like he
Right.
says, make it for whatever purpose you want to.
Yeah. This
Now-
is for educational purposes only.
There's another firearm that you could make if you wanted to, let's just say, troll a gun buyback, and that is a slam fire shotgun. So basically, without
That's only worth $25.
well, okay, so you get a couple of dollars worth of pipe, an end cap, and a
Right.
screw,
Yeah.
and that's a shotgun.
Right.
So let's just say, for example, you get 2 pieces of pipe. One, the inner diameter is the size, one of which the outer diameter is the size of the inner diameter of the other one. They slide together. One goes over the other. On the back of one, you have an end cap with a screw that acts as a firing pin. The inside diameter of the forward pipe is the exact diameter needed for a 12-gauge shotgun shell. You could look it up. I'm not going to go into that. But you insert the shotgun shell into the pipe, slide the smaller pipe
I mean,
into the bigger
federally,
pipe.
this would be legal to make.
Yes, federally, this is legal to make, as long as it meets a certain length requirement as
Right.
defined by what a firearm is.
Right.
And then you quickly slam the 2 pieces together. The screw in the back detonates the shotgun primer, and boom, you have a shotgun. So for all of, I don't know, $6 worth of pipe, not even, not even, you could probably find some scrap pipe laying around somewhere, turn that in, and
That's crazy,
you could
man.
turn in a pile of them if you wanted to.
Well, a lot of them have caps. You can turn in like 3 or 4 guns at a given time.
Right, so you troll the gun buyback, you get some beer money, and done.
I mean, listen, man. Let's say you stole 4 guns. Now you
Right.
got $800. It's
Right.
like it didn't cost you anything. That's
Exactly.
why I think gun buybacks end up probably promoting a lot of theft.
Yes, that's one
Yeah,
thought behind it. But I happen to think
I mean,
that
I don't
gun-
have any like proof of that, but
No.
I'm just saying, like it
Logic
just seems
stands.
right. It just seems like that could be something that would probably happen.
Right. I happen to think that, these gun buybacks miss the mark in terms of crime.
Yeah.
You get a lot of people, like you said, a woman turning in an old machine gun, or
Right.
a woman, turning in her father's
Things
gun,
that probably
or-
weren't going to be used in crimes to begin with.
Yeah.
You
You
know?
think some criminals gonna be like, yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna use this gun to shoot up those homies.
Yeah.
Like that's
I just think it's definitely not it. This is why I think that it's more so to take away people's guns, not like, hey, get rid of your guns, like no questions asked, whatever.
So you think the intent behind it is to basically slowly get guns out of people's hands?
Yeah, I think that's a big portion of it. I mean, I think when you're met with, especially rising crime rates, look at New York City right now, man. It's like crazy. There's portions of the city that are up 250% in shootings.
Yeah.
I could see this, and
Are those people going to turn in their guns and gun buybacks?
right, and the city knows that it can't just go in and take everybody's guns because they don't, there's no registration. They don't know where they are. So for them to say, let's push the gun buyback program to get rid of these guns. Let's just take them. Let's take them. I mean,
I don't think the real criminals though are turning into guns.
No.
It's people that aren't going to use them.
Right,
in
but
crimes.
I could see them saying like, "Hey, look, these are guns that are likely to be stolen." Because I gotta believe a lot of the guns used in these shootings are stolen weapons.
Stolen from out of state.
So
or border traffic.
let's buy them back before they get stolen. That could be a way to, in their eyes, curb crime rates. But there's an endless supply of guns all over the country.
Right.
If you can't get a gun in New York City that originated in New York City, you can get a gun anywhere.
Right.
You could drive out of state and buy a gun. You could drive out of state and steal a gun.
Yeah, legally.
You know, there was a guy you were just telling me who got arrested from it was like a parking ticket. They searched the guy's car. He had like 5 or 6 guns that he trafficked.
We talked about this on the previous episode.
That's I know.
Yeah. So, again, if you can't stop people from committing federal level crimes of trafficking guns into New York City, what makes you think that those people that do that crime are then going to want to turn them into the government for $200 when they could sell that gun for $1,000 on the streets?
I wonder how much you actually can buy them on the streets.
It's
got to be less than $1,000.
Well,
it's got to be less.
I have no idea, man. You get a Glock that retails for $500-$600, right?
Stolen is $0.
Right. Stolen is $0. But let's just say, for example, now this person is assuming all the risk of then selling that gun to you, and then there is a markup on the street. Obviously, some guns are cheaper than others, but there's that markup for the fact of, hey, you're a criminal, I'm a criminal, I'm selling this to you, no bullshit.
Yeah.
If the gun is clean, it's worth more than if the gun is dirty. You know what I mean? If the gun is hot,
I don't think they give a shit about that.
They do, because if they use it to commit a crime, then they don't want a gun that already has record or bodies on it. They want a clean gun to commit that crime with.
I'm sure everybody tells everybody that all the guns are clean.
Well, it could be.
That's that's probably movie shit. I think that people just fucking, if they need a gun, they're going to take it because they're not planning on getting caught.
I've seen some documentaries, especially there was one, again, Vice News, but whatever it's worth. This is when they were good, at least years ago, where they went into Detroit and they were interviewing illegal arms dealers, and they're like, they had like Draco pistols and they had all these guns, and he's like, a gun that doesn't have bodies on it is worth more. Like, this is where I get this information from, things like that. Again, they could just be playing up for the camera. Who the fuck knows? But
I mean,
let's just say you get caught with that gun in the commission of a crime.
Right.
They run the ballistics or the serial number, and they said, "Oh, this ballistic matches an unsolved murder." Now you're on the hook for that. Like,
that's not true.
I don't know.
It's and yeah, they could pin a lot of things on you, bro. It comes down to more than that, because the defense could be, I stole the gun.
Yo, Anna,
you know what I mean?
I stole this gun.
I have a gun.
I didn't kill that man.
Right? No, but isn't that could be a valid defense, right? I stole the gun. I bought the gun illegally. And then what? The prosecution has to not only prove, hey, he had the gun, but it's, hey, he had the gun. He was in the state it happened. He was the one who was there. Yeah. It's more than just, he's gonna get. Yes, they can close out a lot of cases by saying this was the guy. He has the gun,
right,
and make themselves look good. We closed a lot of cases. We got the guy with the gun, but that doesn't mean at the end of the day those charges are going to stick. He's going to get convicted. And, dude, these criminals know that.
Yeah.
Especially in a state like New York, where you have all these bail reforms and there's murder recidivists out there somehow. Yeah. So, it's just one of those things. And they know that. And they also, listen, man, I've heard of guns being found in cars. According to the New York State penal law, if there's 4 people in a car and 1 gun, everyone's charged with the possession of that gun. And every single one of them gets dropped, because the prosecution at the end of the day, if they go to court, cannot prove whose gun it is, and they're not going to get a conviction on all 4. Those charges get dropped.
Well, that's surprising.
So if we want to curb gun violence and gun crime, we need to be harder. When people get arrested, we need to have our ADAs and DAs and officials be harder on prosecuting these offenses to the fullest extent, based on the penal law.
Well, technically, isn't it New York where it's a mandatory minimum of 3 years if you're caught with an unregistered gun?
I'm not sure of the sentencing, but if you read the penal law, and let's say it's you and me in a car, we have a gun in the car, in a place like New York City where it's not legal to have, neither of us can legally have that gun, and both of us don't fess up for it,
right?
We're both going to get arrested. We're both going to get charged. When it gets to the DA level, it's most likely going to get dropped, because there's no way at the end of the day when it goes to court, because remember, it's beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
So, and then you have to ask yourself, is the court system working? if that's the case, I mean,
well, we already know
you
that
know,
it's not
but
effective
then,
at the
but then
moment.
at the same time, what happens if it was your gun and not mine? And now I'm being charged with the possession of a gun that wasn't even mine. And that's kind of the balance that they have to strike. I understand. But at the same time, I think that we need to be harder. When we do catch these people with these guns, we have to prosecute them to the full extent of the law. And I hope that most people feel that way, you know, but it seems like more and more people are on the side of the people who are breaking the law than the people who are protecting people.
Like my side of that is, if you get caught with the gun in the commission of a crime, I feel like you should be punished with that. I don't think having a gun is cause enough for you to get arrested. Obviously, New York laws and whatever.
Well,
but just possessing a firearm, regardless of where you are, I don't think is enough for you to get arrested. Like, obviously, there's laws in New York City, for example. I know we pick on New York City all the time.
So if you have an unpermitted handgun in your possession in a place like New York City, or even
I'm just saying that
even
the
in New
law
York,
is still fucked. I don't think that the law should tell you that you should have that a gun should be registered. That's what I'm getting at. My personal opinion. Yeah. Again, this is my opinion.
Well, that's like a constitutional issue.
Well, exactly. I think,
but we're talking like, at this point, like especially in New York City, we're talking about like statute.
Right. So, for example, a woman, let's just say an old grandmother has a gun, right? And she, by what you're saying, if she has a gun that she's had since like the fucking 30s, let's just say, she gets caught with it.
Caught it with it? What? She's walking down the street with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Technically in New York.
Well, caught with it could be in her house. Could be in her car. Could be in her grocery bag.
Let's just say she had it in her purse for whatever reason.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, she gets stopped by the police, or something happens, and somebody saw the gun, and then somebody alerted a cop and said, hey, that old lady has a gun in her purse. Sure. Okay, that happens. She could open her purse at the bodega to go pay, and then somebody saw the gun and be like, oh shit, Granny's got a gun.
Okay.
They flag down a cop and say, hey, that old woman's got a gun.
Happens all the time. Not necessarily this exact situation with a grandma, but people do see guns all the time.
Right.
Okay.
Now, by what you said, she should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law because she has an unregistered handgun in New York City.
Well, what you were saying was, what I was saying was, if you have two people in the car, that's when they're not, like, the prior thing that I said about two people in the car, but those people aren't going to be prosecuted. I don't think that at the end of the day, she'll still probably be arrested, unfortunately, have to go through that process. I don't think at the end of the day that she'll be convicted of anything, because what happens is you have a whole court process. So if she comes to court and says, hey, and her defense says, look, it was her husband's, bought it in the 40s. She always had it. She always carried it. She didn't know the laws. You know what I mean? And I know ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Right. By some people's definition, though, they say, oh, we need to strictly enforce these gun laws.
Right.
There is a caveat to that. Said, well, now you're going to get a lot of people sweeped in who aren't criminals, who are subject to these gun laws that are just erroneous and overreaching. So this is why I think that...
But at the same time, you had said, in the commission of a crime, like, grandma ain't committing any crimes.
Well, no, this is what I'm getting at. So if you have a gangbanger that uses a gun in a crime, obviously then that person should be, convicted of that.
Right.
But that same law of having an unregistered firearm also applies to somebody who's not using it in the commission of a crime.
Right.
This is what I'm getting at.
And I think that's where the court process comes into play. And grandma can still be processed, and not that anybody wants to see.
If there's a mandatory minimum, though, on possession of an unregistered firearm, then
I think mandatory minimums are stupid anyway.
Well, mandatory minimums, like I said, if you prosecute somebody, again, a gun and using commission,
but they still have to be found guilty of
committing a crime,
right? So
what I'm getting at is,
even if grandma had the gun in her purse, whatever, she gets arrested, gets charged, and the prosecution goes forth with it as hard as they can, and at the end of the day, it's still proven that really she didn't, at least because they could prove that she didn't realize she did anything wrong and all this. She's 99 years old, doesn't have a criminal record. It was her husband's gun. They could prove all this nonsense. She's not going to get convicted of that.
My point is that having a firearm shouldn't be a criminal offense, and this is why gun buybacks, I feel, are they're very predatory in this aspect. They said, hey, you had this gun that you're not doing anything with, it's in your drawer, come to us, we'll buy it from you, no questions asked.
Yeah.
Now
the question that we're talking about is not just having a gun. Should having a gun be legal or not legal? Just being in possession of it. The current laws state that if your shit's not permitted, is illegal.
Right.
So yes, you and I both fundamentally believe that it's not a crime just having a firearm.
Right.
But when we're navigating the waters of the laws that we are surrounded by, we have to look at it that way too. So yes, I agree with you. Having a firearm shouldn't be illegal. You should be able to carry a firearm. You should be able to carry a handgun. You shouldn't need to register your handgun.
These gun buybacks, though, tell you that you shouldn't have this gun. You should sell it to us. And that's another thing I take issue with. Again, like you say, kind of like a mandatory buyback thing.
Yeah.
Well, if you're out of options in let's just say a city like New York, to where you have a gun, it's not registered, you can't sell it, you can't do anything with it, and if you get caught with it, you could go to jail even though you didn't commit a crime with it. Well, then your only option is to sell it to the government. I'm not saying sell it back because it was never theirs, but sell it to the government, no questions asked. That's your only reprieve out of that.
Yeah, it is. It's your only way out.
And that's why I said
But look, hear me out. At least they're giving you an option. The option isn't you're going to jail. The option is there is a way out if you don't know what else to do.
Well, that's why I think it doesn't curb gun violence.
No,
this is like a long-winded way of basically me saying it only affects people who, I don't want to say are innocent, but it doesn't hit the target of what they're going for.
Yeah.
Because the criminals aren't going to give up their guns. They would value that gun as a utility of committing crimes in self-defense more than $200.
Yeah.
It only affects people that don't have other options, that are really strapped for cash, that are just in a really hard position. So this is why I think that gun buybacks look good on paper for politicians. They look good on paper for the community.
Yeah.
They try and tout all this stuff, and this is where these politicians get like
Beto
O'Rourke get these ideas of we're going to have a national gun buyback. It's like what criminal is going to sell you? Yeah,
mandatory.
What criminal is going to sell you their gun?
Right.
And that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So to me, on a national level, moving from a local...
What it's probably about is just disarming the law-abiding citizen.
And this is what I'm getting at. Moving from the local level to the national level, the model for a gun buyback on a national level is disarmament. Is basically saying, you don't have an option. You can't own this gun. You have to give it to us or you're going to jail. If you're not a criminal, though, why should I give it to you?
To say that there's a mandatory buyback on all AR-15s and AK-47s, that's a confiscation of AR-15s and AK-47s.
It is.
And that's the government saying, hey, these are illegal now. You can't own them. You have to give them to us. You have to sell them to us. If you don't by a certain date, you're fucked.
Right. Or if you get caught with it after that date, you're fucked.
Right.
Which,
Right. And they'll shove it right up your ass because they'll say you had an opportunity to turn it in, but you chose to keep it and break the law.
And this is why that's obviously something I take issue with. But
I think everybody and I think everybody should take issue with it, even if you're somebody who is anti-gun, or pro-gun control. Let me put it that way. It should concern you that the government is trying to take away one of your rights.
Right.
Whether or not you utilize that right, agree with that right. We don't all agree with you being able to say certain things, but you do have the freedom of speech
to say it. And this is why when you were asking me, do you think on the smaller level, if it's more of a mandatory confiscation or if it's more of just an intent to just give up the gun because you don't want it?
Well, not mandatory, just confiscation in general. Do you think it's more geared toward confiscation, disarmament, or...
on the local level, I feel as if it's not, let's just say, confiscation.
It's
but
more
if
of
it's
a community-led,
bullshit. But on a national level, it would be confiscation oriented. It would be, that's the guise they use. The whole, it worked in Australia thing, bullshit. So, and you know what? I think on a federal level, there will be people that will do it because they want to be the good law-abiding citizen.
Right.
But, other people...
I think people would absolutely do it, not only to be the, quote, good law-abiding citizen, but because they're fucking scared.
Yeah, but there will be plenty of people, and hopefully the overwhelming majority, that says, go fuck yourself.
Well, there would be mass noncompliance, of course. God.
Imagine telling America...
But we talk about mass noncompliance. I mean, this would be mass noncompliance.
Imagine telling America to give up their guns. What?
Yeah, no.
Motherfucker, no.
Yeah, and people always say, oh, it worked in Australia. It worked in the UK. The
really
cops don't even have guns in the UK.
Really
Dude,
didn't.
You could read articles and articles and articles about cops who are stabbed in the eyes because they don't have firearms and they're expected to go fight somebody with their fucking hands or with a baton versus a knife
Or the
versus
guy
machetes
does have a gun and the cop
versus swords.
doesn't.
I heard a really good interview with what's the guy's YouTube? I think it's Free Field Training on YouTube. Really, really, really great guy. His name is Tommy. He did like a phone interview, I believe it was. I listened to it maybe a couple of years ago. It was him and a cop from the UK, and he was just asking him questions. And one of the questions he asked him was, "Look, if you show up to a scene and there's a perp with a gun and he's pointing that gun at you, what do you do?" And he was like, "My life is in the hands of the criminal, and I have to hope that he doesn't want to take my life today." Can you imagine going to work every day like that as a police officer here in the United States, where
Guns are more prevalent.
they're more prevalent, and it's our country's based on it. It's a right.
They actually just arrested a guy in the Bronx. He was a wanted criminal from Massachusetts. I don't know if you saw this.
Oh yeah,
he shot. He shot at 2 police officers, and he got killed.
Okay, so what I saw in the news, because I don't want to give anything away that I shouldn't, but saw in the news that he was wanted in connection with the shooting of a police officer.
Oh, a state trooper in Massachusetts.
I'm not sure if that state trooper did that state trooper die?
No.
Okay. And it looked like the marshals showed up to try and arrest the guy.
Yeah, federal.
He shot at them. He ended up shooting 2 marshals and an NYPD detective.
Yeah.
All expected to survive. Yeah. I don't know the extent of their injuries. Hopefully not substantial. Hopefully not life-changing. The officers there returned fire and killed him.
Yeah. Now, do you think that criminal would have turned his gun into a gun buyback?
No, I think that criminal knew fully when the cops came knocking at his door, he was going to fight to the death.
Yeah.
100%. He had already killed an officer. Yeah. Attempted to kill an officer. Murder, yeah. Right. And he knew. I just think he knew.
Right.
Like, you know what? If they come for me, fuck it.
And these are the people that the politicians say the gun buybacks will affect. If they'll get the guns off the streets, they're not going to be able to commit crimes.
No.
Bullshit. Mm-hmm. That guy had a gun and shot at federal agents and police officers, knowing full well what the fucking consequences were going to be.
Right. But you also got to think that this is a guy who is basically suicide by cop. As far as he's saying to himself, I'm fucked either way. I'm going to go out in a blaze and they'll fucking kill me. I don't care.
Right. He's going to try and take a few with him.
There's no way he thought to himself, I'm going to survive this. There was a lot of people there.
Oh yeah.
So
I saw the news article.
Right.
Man. It was pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's to me, like I said, he's not going to give up his guns in a gun buyback.
Right.
And they actually had to send armed agents and police in to try and get him.
Yeah. And they got him one way or the other. And you know what? The crazy part is, and I haven't heard anybody be up in arms or want to riot over this. The guy would have been taken peacefully and would have answered for his crimes in the proper way if he didn't shoot back.
Yeah, probably.
If he didn't shoot first, I should say. Because cops can't just open fire on people. This ain't the 60s, the 70s. Oh, well, I mean, if you think about it, up until, I want to say relatively recently, 30 or 40 years, during any commission of a felony, officers were allowed to shoot to stop somebody. In New York State, in the city. Yeah. Like, people would, And that changed when there was a guy, he was wanted for a felony. It was like a burglary. And officers were chasing the guy. He went to go jump over a fence, I believe it was, and a couple officers shot him in the back, killed him, and the guy stole $38.
Yeah.
So at that point, they were like, wait a minute, we're fucking killing people over a robbery for $38? No, can't do that anymore. And I think that's a step in the right direction. We can't just fucking shoot people in the back because they committed a fucking, because they stole someone's wallet.
Right.
But there was a time in this country where that was perfectly okay and you were perfectly good. You shot that guy in the back. I mean, it's a little fucky, but we're obviously in a different place now. This guy obviously shot first. 3 officers were injured. Could have died.
Oh yeah, very easily.
So
if you
unfortunately,
shoot a gun at somebody, your intent is to kill them. I mean, at least you know the way I see it.
Right. Unfortunately, I'm going to say unfortunate because I don't want anyone to be killed ever. Unfortunately, this guy had to pay for his crime in a different manner. Mm-hmm. A manner that didn't have to be.
No.
So, but due to his own actions, that's what became of it. So,
right. And gun buybacks, I think, wouldn't have affected him.
No. I mean, there was gun buybacks around him, right? He could have.
Yeah.
This was what?
This was like this
2 days ago, I think it was.
And there was a gun buyback in Queens.
He missed the gun buyback by one day.
Oh, shucks. So, and this is what I'm getting at. Gun buybacks don't.
Yeah,
target,
they don't work.
No,
They really don't. This guy had this firearm with the intent to use it.
and he was already a felon. He was already a prohibited possessor.
Yeah.
So interstate, he fled Massachusetts, went to New York, interstate travel. I mean, he runs the gambit of crimes that How do you stop somebody from doing that? You know,
Right.
And people will say, well, gun buybacks get guns off the streets. That way people can't get the guns to commit the crimes.
Okay.
There's enough guns out there to
Sure.
where that's your one guy
Sure.
that your one buyback in Queens is not going to have a dent.
I think, but we could sit on the fence and say, yeah, that's true. But also, it doesn't make that much of a difference. So does it get guns up the street that people might steal? Yeah, it might. Does it make enough of a difference? And can those people no longer get firearms? No. So what are we doing? It really doesn't make a difference.
Right. Your one gun buyback that you have that might yield 45 guns is not effective in stopping.
What's the estimate of guns in the U.S. right now?
I think it's one per person, so a little over 300 million.
Okay.
Or more than that now.
So assume that is the amount of guns per person in New York State or in New York City. How many people live in New York City? It's like 7 or 8 million, right?
Something like that.
So let's just say there's 7 or 8 million guns in the city.
No way.
Let me see if I can find it.
What the
estimate amount of guns in New York City.
That's going to be a really tricky number, man, because like I said, between 2010 and 2015, from an article I read, there was 5,000 guns seized by the NYPD. 5,000 over 5 years. That's about 1,000 per year that were actually caught. So, I mean, there's got to be several thousands.
So this says there's 30,000 New York City civilian handgun permit holders.
Is that
out
New
of
York?
9 million?
Right, out of 9 million people. So 30,000 out of 9 million.
Or about 3 guns per 1,000. There are also 50,000.
And that's legal. Those are legal gun owners.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. So what do you think it is? 50,000?
Probably. I mean,
so they were able to take 10% of the guns.
I mean,
over 5 years.
And that depends, dude, because I mean, there's more and more coming in every day. There's
Right.
more leaving, getting thrown in rivers, getting destroyed. So I mean, three legal guns per 1,000 people legally, and those legal gun owners aren't going to turn them into a gun buyback. They're papered, and they're going.
And you know what though? There's got to be more than. This actually at the end of this article it says call it 50,000. Call it New York City less than 60,000 grams.
So you're thinking
50,000. Therefore,
how old is that article? Does it give a date on that?
Okay, this at the end of this, no. This is just really, really rough math. It's an estimate. This guy's estimating between 130 to 200,000 guns in New York City.
That's not.
I could see that.
Yeah, between all 5 boroughs.
If there's 30,000 civilians who have handgun permits.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've seen some of these people have 10, 20, 30 guns.
Yeah.
It's very possible. And then you have handgun. This does not cover shotguns,
right?
Rifles. Those are different permits. I could see at least 200,000 plus.
But you're talking
illegal
legal
guns.
Oh, well, you're talking.
Well, I'm
legal.
saying plus illegal guns. We're looking at it's got to be like that many at least between around 200,000. So they really didn't get any guns off the street. 5,000 over 5 years. It's 1,000 a year.
Yeah. So that's why I think it's not very effective. And you could, like I said, troll the gun buybacks. Submit 2 pieces of pipe with an end cap and a screw, and here's my shotgun. That's not a shotgun. Oh, yes, it is. By federal definition, it is. It has to be a certain length, and we could go try it out right now. Let's go.
I will demonstrate.
Yeah. So there's plenty of things you could look up and about them, and there's plans online to make them. And people could get fancy and put grips on them. And it's actually pretty interesting. I mean, they were used a lot by guerrilla forces in the Philippines and Vietnam and World War II, by the Philippine guerrillas fighting the Japanese, and then into Vietnam they were using them, the Viet Cong, the NVA.
This is interesting. In 1995, Rudy Giuliani said that 90% of guns in New York City came from out of state.
Yeah, that's how they're trafficked in.
Just another push for pushing for gun buybacks doesn't really make a difference, because that's only 90% of those guns coming in are from out of state, so they're still going to come in from out of state,
right?
And it's got to be 90% still.
Oh yeah,
if not more.
Exactly, especially since laws in New York were tightened, and there's other states where, let's just say, laws are a little less restrictive, but again, you're still committing a crime, buying that gun with the intent to traffic it interstate to sell it to somebody in New York where it's illegal to do so.
Yeah.
So you're still committing a crime.
For sure.
Federal laws aren't stopping a person from trafficking guns. They should, by theory, but they don't.
Yeah. Basically, in short, gun buyback programs are useless.
Right.
And we don't agree with them. Obviously, I think most pro-gun people are not. They don't think they work. They don't agree with them.
Right. We don't want to see guns getting shredded up, melted, destroyed for no reason. Especially historical ones or valuable ones.
Right.
Interesting ones at that. That's just my opinion.
It's my opinion too, and it's a lot of opinions of a lot of other people. So I guess that's it for today. I don't know if we have anything else to say about gun buyback programs other than we don't agree with them. Stevie, you have anything to add? What do you think, Stevie?
Very good episode. I don't understand. What do you expect from me?
Well, nothing, I guess.
Even though
That's it for
We
today.
just had to wake him up over there.
I think he fell asleep. He was snoring. But that's it for today, guys. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, everywhere you can find a podcast. Like, share, post, join our community, talk to us, share pictures, share posts, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Comment on our pictures, whatever it is. Listen to our podcast, please. Share it with your friends if you like it. Unlike ammunition, we are not in a shortage. We have plenty of videos. Oh, that reminded me. I was just thinking of something funny before. With all these shootings are up right now. I'm really curious where these perps are buying their ammo at, because they are expending a lot of 9mm.
Well, it's like that old Chris Rock bit. It's not gun control. They should have bullet control. If every
but
bullet
there's no
costs $5,000. You think twice about
there's
shooting
no
somebody.
bullets right now, and the gun crime is higher than ever. It's like it's up
spending money.
fucking 200% in some places, and
I'd blow your head off if I could afford it.
yeah.
Chris Rock.
Yeah. All right, y'all.
Sounds
That's
good,
it
man.
for today. Again, like, follow, share, check out other episodes. We thank you guys for being here. We love you all. That's it for today. And as always, tell it.
Stay safe and don't give your guns back to the government.
Don't do it.
Later, guys.
Thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode of the New York Gun Guys podcast. If you guys enjoyed the show, check out our previous episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find a podcast. We have new episodes every Monday and Friday, so check us out. We're also on Instagram and Facebook at NYGunGuys. Check us out. Give us a like. Give us a follow. Share it. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much for tuning in, and as always, stay safe.